Hampir sebulan pertumpahan darah antara pasukan Rusia dan Ukraina masih berlanjut. Alih-alih melunak, Rusia justru meningkatkan serangan dengan mengerahkan kapal-kapal perangnya untuk mengepung Ukraina, setelah sebelumnya mengandalkan pasukan darat.
We were deceived about that, and that is of course a very difficult thing to accept.
Pengadilan Internasional atau ICJ telah memerintahkan Rusia untuk menghentikan invasi ke Ukraina, sedangkan Dewan Keamanan PBB atas permintaan 6 negara barat mengupayakan sidang terbuka tentang Ukraina.
Tremendous loss of human life.
Uni Eropa pun turut bicara terkait konflik kedua negara. Saat bertemu liputan6.com di kantornya, Duta Besar Uni Eropa untuk Indonesia Vincent Piket menegaskan posisi Uni Eropa yang membela Ukraina dan mengutuk keras penyerangan Rusia.
Very important to say that the EU has opened itself for Ukrainian refugees. We have abolished any visa requirement.
Sahabat liputan6.com, hari ini saya bersama dengan Ambasador Uni Eropa Vincent Piket untuk membicarakan mengenai konflik antara Rusia dan Ukraina. Good afternoon, Mr. Piket. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us today. So, Mr. Piket, let's start with the first question to this conversation. Could you open this conversation with telling us about the current situation in Ukraine and the actions that EU has taken to stop this conflict?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're seeing in Ukraine at the present moment is a massive invasion of a sovereign country by Russian military, by land, by air, and by the sea, with huge destruction all around of the infrastructure of the country, huge destruction in the civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, also private infrastructure, shops and factories, and a tremendous loss of human life. Thousands of civilians killed in the war, and of course tens of thousands of people trapped in cities that are under siege and that are being shot at with artillery and missiles. So a huge humanitarian crisis is taking shape. And what has the EU done? Of course, first of all, political activities, outreach before it all happened, massive investment in contacts to try and convince President Putin not to go down the road of war. He has not heeded our calls and the calls of many others, made by many others in this regard, which we very much regret. Secondly, action at the international diplomatic level, in particularly the adoption with 141 members of the UN General Assembly of a resolution condemning this invasion and calling on Russia to respect the ceasefire and to withdraw its troops to outside Ukraine's territorial borders. So that was a massive call by the international community towards Russia. 141 countries. There were only 4 countries supporting Russia, just to give you the overall picture. Lastly, we support Ukraine in different ways. Financial aid to keep the government and the country running, salaries paid, and so on. Just last week, 1.2 billion euros worth of money from the EU to Ukraine. Secondly, humanitarian aid for the people displaced inside Ukraine, estimate according to the UN of about 2.5 million, who have fled their homes, their towns, because of the violence. And thirdly, of course, humanitarian support to the refugees that land in the EU. 2.2 million people at the moment, mostly, of course, reaching our eastern neighbors, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, and being received there by the governments, but also, I must say, by the citizens of Europe, the citizens of those countries, who express a tremendously strong sympathy, solidarity with the Ukrainian citizens on account of what's happening to them.
So the citizens of Europe are very welcoming to all these refugees coming into their countries?
Indeed they are, and that is across the board. In fact, it's of course very pronounced in the countries that I've mentioned that border on Ukraine or on Russia, and but also elsewhere. I was in Berlin personally last week, and I could see that there how much this lives amongst normal citizens and who wish to do something, who want to help drive refugees from Ukraine, from the border town in Poland or in Slovakia, where they enter the EU and then take them to shelter in their home member states. Very important to say that the EU has opened itself for Ukrainian refugees. We have abolished any visa requirement. People can stay in the EU for a year to start with, hopefully not longer necessary. They can work, they can go to school, and they get an allowance which is supported by the European Union's budget.
I see. Well, concerning that, secondly, Russia claims they are not attacking civilians, just the military facilities. What is your comment on that?
That this is a lie. You don't need to look far at the photographs that come in from all over Ukraine, not just the conflict zones where it all started, but also deep down in the southwest, the west of the country. You see evidence, objective photographic evidence and film evidence of civilian infrastructure being hit, struck, and of civilians dying as a result of the conflict. So this is not true. We see, moreover, Russia hindering the humanitarian evacuation, which locks people up in cities that are under siege and which only aggravates the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. So a very, very worrying situation, and it is certainly not true that only military objects are attacked. Let's not forget that the Russian military have taken the non-operational Chernobyl nuclear power plant. There is no military significance or economic significance in it. The power plant doesn't work. It's just there, preserved for eternity. But it was still taken by Russian military, and you can only wonder what's behind that operation. And the suspicion is very much this is just another way to try and threaten the Ukrainian population and way beyond, of course.
So you want to underline that the Russia is lying, that it's not only attacking the military facilities?
The evidence shows and demonstrates that there is civilian casualties.
When Russia decided to attack Ukraine, did the EU find it surprising? Because just a week before invasion, Russia claimed they would not invade.
I think we should go back a little bit further and look at the history of Europe, the history of the world. We had World War II, which ended in 1945. We have on the European continent built European Union, a zone of peace, stability ever since. It's been successful. We had thought, we reunited Europe after the fall of the Iron Curtain, and we had thought that everybody had learned that we don't want to go back to where we came from war, from tremendous suffering among people, as we had in the Second World War, not just in the western part of Europe, but also in Russia. Let me say that very clearly. Millions and millions of Russians died during the Second World War. We had thought that that was a lesson for everybody, not to go down the road of war once more. We were deceived about that, and that is of course a very difficult thing to accept. Secondly, more in the shorter term, yes indeed, you're right. There have been 4, 5, 6 visits to Moscow by our top leaders from the EU, but also from outside the EU, making the case for de-escalation, and you're right, the message that one got from President Putin was a reassuring one, while at the same time he was doing something different, and that is what we have seen since the 24th of February.
So you think that the EU has been deceived, so the EU is surprised when Russia attacked Ukraine?
Well, we are surprised by the trend overall, evidently, and of course we are very much deceived by the presentations that were made to us and what happened last. But our deception is not unique. It's shared with everybody around the world. There's 140, as I say, keep on saying, 141 countries saying that this is just not on, and this is not something that anybody should do and can tolerate in the current world, where we have enough challenges as we without even this conflict.
Yeah, as of now, there's a pandemic still.
Indeed.
Indeed. So what do you think is the main purpose of Russia in this invasion? They claim it's because of NATO expansion, but what is the view of EU?
Well, you should ask Russia about what the purpose is. From our point of view, there is no purpose whatsoever, and there is happening a violation of the international order at a scale that we have not seen for decades, and a human suffering that we had not seen either for so long. So for us, there's only one way of resolving this, and that is for President Putin to call back its troops unconditionally, to respect a ceasefire, and to come to a negotiation table for constructive negotiations about the long-term solution.
You mentioned that Russia is lying. So are you concerned with the spreading of misinformation? What are the EU strategies in countering misinformation in this conflict?
Well, we've started to talk about misinformation as a weapon of misinformation, and it is indeed a fact that that this is being used aggressively by the Russian authorities to their advantage, as they hope, inside Ukraine and outside, internationally. The European Commission and the External Affairs Department maintains a database and a website itemizing a number of those, and for readers who are interested, they can see it there. And what one reads there is a cynical twisting of the facts, cynical fabrication of the facts, and all meant to promote the Russian cause and to justify, as it were, the military operation that they embarked on.
And as we can see now, they're also blocking a lot of social medias in their own country.
Indeed, the media in Russia weren't free even before the war, but now there's not much of freedom left at all. The social media are blocked. The sources of information for citizens are very limited, which of course is a part of a very conscious strategy on the side of the Kremlin.
Coming back to that, what are the EU strategies in combating these misinformations?
We put forward systematically our objective objective presentation of the facts. We mince no words. We mince neither looking back nor looking forward. We promote free media. We protect journalists. Any journalist that wants to work in the EU is free to do so within the normal rules of the rule of law. And we have suspended 2 Russian propaganda channels, Russia Today and Sputnik, tools of the armed forces to propagate the military campaign and to push a discourse, a narrative about Ukraine, its leadership and its people that is absolutely false. So that those 2 channels have been suspended. Yeah. It's not what we do normally. We are societies that respect media, freedom of expression, but in this particular case, with 2 TV channels pushing purely a war propaganda narrative, there's only one thing one can do.
Okay. Russian ambassador said that the Ukrainian government is neo-Nazi, even though President Zelensky is Jewish. What do you think of the neo-Nazi accusation?
Well, this is one example of the blatant and cynical misinformation that is being fabricated by the Kremlin and its outlets. Ukraine is a democratic country. It had elections a couple of years ago for the parliament. Not the single right-wing, let alone Nazi, person was elected to parliament. So that, I think, in a simple, very objective way, shows that this story is utterly fabricated. So it's just a narrative that is used by the Kremlin to propagate its own campaign domestically towards the Russian audience, and who I'm sure don't like at all what they directly or indirectly hear about what's happening in Ukraine, and to make sure that any objective information is hindered. This sort of fabrication keeps on coming.
Well, on the other hand, Russia has also been using Donetsk and Luhansk as an excuse to invade. They say that the West is ignoring the people there from persecution. Could you tell us about your view on that?
We think we have the facts to show that all this too is a fabrication. The situation in these 2 provinces is difficult, and there has been a tense situation ever since in 2014. Separatists, with the support, active military support from Russia, went on an independence path, but the allegations made by Russia about a supposed genocide or something are just absolutely rubbish. Now, that's me saying, and the Russians will contradict what I say. The good thing is that in the United Nations Human Rights Council, a large majority of the countries who could vote, 31 of them voted in favor of a resolution expressing concern about the human rights and humanitarian effects and impacts of the conflict. And they also voted for the establishment of a committee, a panel for investigation of human rights infringements, for war crimes, etc. So now, if that, I think, will be a wonderful opportunity. Once there is a possibility for this commission of inquiry to start working, to go out to these 2 oblasts, provinces, Luhansk and Donetsk, and find out objectively what actually mattered. And I'm sure they will confirm the version that I've just proposed to you.
Yeah, we will also wait for that, for them to properly investigate the situation. Ukraine wants to join the EU. Could you update us on the process?
It's been in our political vision for years. We have an association agreement with Ukraine that puts down in legal language the European destiny of Ukraine. And ever since that agreement was signed, we have been working and supporting Ukraine in adapting its economy, adapting the institutions of the government, etc., in order to make such a European path possible. Now, we have now a new situation with an urgent need to offer Ukraine a clearer and a more immediate perspective of actually joining the European Union. This was said literally by the EU leaders, the heads of state and heads of government, in their summit in France last Friday. So we are looking at that. Ukraine has actually now also put its application for membership, so we have now something to work on. And that is the task we have. And let me say two things about that. We have to be very realistic. In the current war situation, of course, it is impossible for Ukraine to accede to the European Union. There has to be a peace or a lasting ceasefire or something similar. So that is the bottom line remains the cessation of conflict and the withdrawal of foreign troops, Russian troops from Ukraine's soil. Secondly, joining the EU is not like joining the fitness club or similar. It's not. It's
not a simple process.
It requires a lot of preparation and politically, institutionally, economically, of course. So it's something that may take some time, but I do think, and this is more not yet written in our policy thinking, what we need is creative solutions that bring something of a result in the nearer term, and creativity and dictated by the acute necessity of stabilizing Ukraine.
So the possibility of Ukraine joining EU in the near future is like what?
Near future, I don't know. I can't pin it down to a year or a date, but this perspective of joining is there, and the EU leaders have committed themselves to that just last Friday.
How many refugees that are coming into EU right now?
There's, I think the UN said 2.5 million total, and Ukrainian refugees, 300,000 are in Moldova, which is a small country between Ukraine and Romania, and there's 2.2 million inside the European Union.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and where will it go? We don't know. It all depends on how long the conflict will last, and how the citizens of Ukraine continue to be faced with violence and the risk of death. So therefore we need a ceasefire and we need a withdrawal of troops.
How has EU helped the peace process, and do you think the ceasefire will happen soon?
Well, up to now we have not been part of the peace process. We've been part of a bilateral cooperation with Russia for bringing it closer to the EU, at their wish, a sovereign choice by Ukraine. We've also worked a lot with Ukraine within a regional framework called the Eastern Partnership, bringing together the countries of the eastern part of the EU with the western part of Eastern Europe, and that has been quite fruitful. We have to push that forward, evidently, very much. And other than that, I think we have to, from the EU, talking from the EU side, face the fact that we have a new security situation on our eastern border with a neighboring country that seems it's possible and permissible to attack other countries. So the EU will enter a phase of rethinking our security infrastructure, our security approach. This is not to say that we are offensive in any way. No, we are not. But we react to what we see around us. We react to the risk of similar events as we're seeing now happening again in other parts of Europe. And of course, that's what we want to avoid.
Okay, lastly, Mr. Ambassador, do you think every country should speak louder concerning this issue?
Absolutely. I think this is not a crisis or an attack that is about the East versus West. It isn't. At the end of the day, most of Russia is part of the West. So it's about a crisis or a challenge, a threat to the international system, the rule of law and the respect for your neighbor country, for other countries, for territorial sovereignty, and the need for peaceful coexistence. So the fundamentals of the UN Charter are at stake here. So for that reason, I mean, it was that 141 countries voted against Russia in the UN. We will have to pursue this. We will have to politically, at the level of the UN and elsewhere, bilaterally, we will have to pursue with our sanctions. The EU has taken massive sanctions, 40 other countries as well. We see that they work. We see that we are beginning to dismantle Russia's capability to finance the military action, and that is what we're in for. So we have to pursue that path as well. The more countries that join in, the better. If they don't put sanction of their own, let's at least cooperate on the implementation of sanctions for those countries who have, and in order to bring this conflict, this crisis, this war to an end as quickly as we can.
Okay. Well, at the end of the day, we all hope for peace to prevail.
I agree, because let me say this, that Europeans, Russians are Europeans. They're close to us. There's numerous links between us and Russia, between Russians and European citizens, personal links, economic links, trade, travel, etc. And all of that now is at risk of being lost. And that is a sad realization. And we are not the enemy of Russian people. We are the enemy of the regime in power in the Kremlin. And so that is, we hope to build back the situation where we can again be together in Europe, a peaceful Europe.
Let's pray for that. Well, thank you very much for talking with us today and for providing us with very much needed answers concerning this issue between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Terima kasih banyak. Itu dia teman-teman Bincang Toko liputan6.com atau bincang-liputan6.com bersama dengan Ambasador Uni Eropa Vincent Piket mengenai isu antara Ukraina dan Rusia. Nantikan lagi episode Bincang Liputan6.com berikutnya. Saya Ratu Sri Asmirat pamit undur diri.